I cried through security and to the woman at the desk when she was unkind. I cried down the big steps, and when I saw the girl from high school standing outside of drug court, I stopped crying, if only to delight in her misfortune. I cried in the car and at the bank when they could not notarize the paperwork, the post office when I had to pay to send the paperwork to my ex so he could sign it and send it back to me. The handsome man at the bank told me a story about a friend of his who'd married and divorced young only to marry a beautiful woman who'd made his dreams come true a few years later. When the man talked, he glanced repeatedly at the photograph of his own wife on the desk beside him. There's something about a recently divorced woman that makes married men very uncomfortable. They have 2 children, he said. They're very happy now. Sometimes, he said, it's for the best. The man at the Social Security office where I went to change my name asked to see my marriage certificate. Divorce, I told him. He, like everyone, was uncomfortable with my marital status and my age, the gold band around his left index finger shiny and new. My ex-husband still blames me for the end of our marriage, I think because I instigated the separation. I still love you, you know, he says. 4. I'm the oldest of 3 daughters, and until very recently the only one to have been married, in part because my marriage ended and my sister's began. I am also the only one without a child, the first college graduate, the only one pursuing a graduate degree, and alone in studying a subject that doesn't have a very specific path to a guaranteed career. I'm closer this year to 30 than to 20, and I suppose I'm thinking a lot about the way I thought my life would go. I remember when my mom turned 30. She had a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 6-month-old baby. She'd started and abandoned college, married my father twice, held a number of jobs, and established a somewhat traditional family life. My youngest sister Paige had a baby at 19 and works at Starbucks. Kayla, the middle sister, finished college before she was pregnant with my niece Olivia, but abandoned her dream of becoming a wildlife officer because she's mostly a mother now. I'm recently divorced, in a long-distance relationship, and studying the arts. My sisters and I, we've built these cages for ourselves, and now we've got to find a way out. 5. On the day I sell my wedding ring, I unbutton the top 2 buttons on my dress, just in case, and march into the pawn shop, where my dad has purchased engagement rings for his many fiancées. Tell them that you're my daughter, he says. Tell them you're moving to Arizona for school. They'll give you a good price. When my father and mother divorced, he had his ring split into 3 equal pieces he presented to each of his daughters as pendants that we never wore. I want to throw his ring and mine as far as I can, watch them sink into the Boise River and disappear into the sand. I can use the money, so I don't. I walk into the store, ask for Rick or John or whoever. While they examine my ring, I stare at sapphires and pocket watches. I've always wanted a pocket watch. After I call my lover, ask if I can buy him dinner. He chooses a pizza restaurant called Casanova. We eat pizza and drink Coca-Cola and hold hands in the parking lot. 6. I was interning for the now infamous senator from Idaho, Mr. Larry Craig of the wide stance and the Minnesota airport bathroom stall during the summer of 2005. I was 20. I was more blue than red, but I cared deeply about the rights of immigrants in my agriculturally based state, and it was a year for immigration reform. Senator Craig was kind. His wife praised my good Scottish name and invited me to ride in their car. The senator talked often about the rights of immigrants living illegally in our country, and I was proud that Idaho had elected someone who could see through the deep red of party lines. When I was promoted to constituent services representative, the calls began pouring in. Larry Craig hates American citizens. Larry Craig hates American jobs. Larry Craig hates American neighborhoods. It turned out that the only thing Larry Craig hated was himself. 7. My grandfather was in his 70s before he told my mother that he loved her. He's a nice man now, quiet because he turns his hearing aids down. He loves John Wayne. Shane is his all-time favorite movie. If one of his grandchildren is in need of money, a car, or a place to stay, he's happy to help out. He sends birthday cards and letters filled with grammatical errors. He signs them, I love you. But this is a recent development. Even in the months in which my grandmother was dying, he didn't say those words. He is a man. Beauty and love are ideas that cannot be quantified or spoken of, except, of course, after that heart attack. My father has always said I love you, if only as a means of ending a phone conversation, so I only recently believed it. Heather, he said, you're pretty good at writing, right? Yes, I replied. Will you look over the letter I wrote asking the judge to remove my felony? Yes, I replied. I love you. 8. When I was 16, my high school hosted an agricultural exposition facilitated primarily by students. Children from surrounding communities would field trip to the week-long event for a day of exhibits that revolved around a more rural lifestyle. The displays chronicled the life of a wheat kernel, the timeline involved in obtaining a glass of milk, and perhaps best of all presented live animals to kids who lived in subdivisions. Executing the event was no small task. Area farmers and families had to first be willing to donate their livestock for a week filled with tiny fingers reaching into makeshift cages. The animals had to be well behaved enough to handle the dirt, sweat, screaming, crying that accompanies elementary field trips. The families had to transport the animals, provide food and feeding instructions, and entrust their livelihood in the hands of well-meaning high school students. Our jobs as students were simpler and infinitely more fun, occasionally clean up after the livestock and lead kids on tours through the school shop, miss class for a week, and eat our daily allotment of ice cream provided by the Dairy Association. The nights were divided amongst juniors and seniors. A group of us were expected to stay the night in this school. Each night the animals did. My 3 best friends and I were assigned a night, a Wednesday, I think. We burned popcorn and watched Dumb and Dumber, our favorite movie. I can still quote most of it. And talked about the boys we liked. Eventually we crawled into our sleeping bags and turned out the lights. The night was restful, of course, until it wasn't. At approximately 4:30 a.m., a long-haired janitor breathed into my face and I jumped prone in my sleeping bag. His English was not very good. I can't remember what he said. The message we received, however, was this: the animals are out. The larger animals, horses, cows, were kept outside and had not escaped. The inside animals, goats, pigs, chickens, and sheep, ran around the school. They'd escaped not only their pens, but the shop. I dragged a goat across the gym by his collar, his hooves gauging the shiny wax floor. The mama pig had become separated from her litter and charged anyone she could. It is important to note that she was fiercely protective and 400 pounds. The animals didn't escape on their own, and we never found out who did it. There was a group of 4 boys we'd earlier discussed who looked uncharacteristically guilty the next day. 9. In a post to the New Yorker blog, writer Susan Orlean says, there will always be vain, obsessive people who want to own rare and extraordinary things, whatever the cost. There will always be people for whom owning beautiful, dangerous animals brings a sense of power and magic. It must be like having a comet in your backyard, a piece of the universe that is dazzling and untouchable right outside your door, she says. Love that is used to justify ownership isn't love at all.
Thanks, Heather. Next up, we have the lovely Hannah Enzer being introduced by the lovely Tim Dyke.
Have you guys seen Hannah's movie? It's called